So now that we have our reader's screen, a class here that knows how to route everything, let's go ahead and look at creating the navigation. So let's go ahead to reader navigation. So the reader navigation will allow, of course, for us to be able to put together the screens in the navigation so that we're able to then go from one screen to the next, right? So what we need to do here? Well, first of all, this has to be a composable. In fact, this is not a class, it's just going to be a fun, like this, function. And let's say composable, such, and as function, we have to put the parentheses there. Okay, the first thing we need is to add a NavController. So say file, NavController such. If I NavController, and then I'm going to use the remember NavController like this, okay? Because we need a NavController, because NavController will be able to direct where we need to go. So we can say NavController dot go to X route, right? So we need that. But for all of that, we also need a place where we can host all of the composable, in this case, all of the screens. Well, for that, we'll need a NavHost. So I'm going to say NavHost as such, and we need to pass the NavController, which is created, right? Because it needs. And then we need to create the graph here that will contain all of the screens, all the composable. So we are building here the actual screens. Now, I'm not going to put graphs like this. I'm actually going to add a startDestination. Okay, so we need to have a starting point. Here is the beauty why we went through the trouble to create this reader screens. Let's see, go back to our readers screens there, because we can have one place where we add all of our screens and the connections and the paths, right, for our screens. So we can use that here. So the starting destination, I could have just put something like hello world or login screen like this, but this is not very scalable. That's why we have the reader screens. Look what I can do. I can say readers screens, right? And I can go to splash screen. That's what I want to get to, .name, right? So I'm passing the name of my destination. That has to be the starting point. All right, and of course this is a lambda. I can go ahead and do that. And now I have inside here the nav graph builder. So this is where I build the graph, meaning the actual composable or the actual screens that I want to show to the user. So how do we create that composable destination or screen? Composable, that is. And let's start again. I just want to show you something. So I say composable. Notice here it says we need to pass a route and arguments. We'll see that later. Okay, so there we go. For a composable here, I need to pass the route. Well, what is the route? Meaning, where is it that I want to go? Well, I want to go to a screen, which I can get from a reader again. Screens, right? Dot. I'm going to go to splash screen. Okay, that name like this. And then, of course, I do have the nav backstack entry, which is an object that we will talk about. So in this case here, then, inside of this composable, in our lambda here, this is where I pass the actual screen. In this case, I'm going to say reader splash screen. Notice the difference here. Now I'm actually invoking the screen, the composable screen we created earlier. And for this, I'm going to pass along the NavController because I want to make sure that I'm able to invoke or get the NavController and get the user the opportunity to, if they wish to so, to go to a different screen if they want to. That's why I'm going to pass along this NavController that I created up here. Now, this is red here because if we go to our ReaderSplashScreen, command click, you see that we don't pass the NavController. So I need here, I'm going to say NavController like that and pass that along. All of these composables, look at them as the screens, are going to be inside of NavHost, and we have the director which is the NavController, because we can then say NavController dot go to X and so forth. So it makes it really easy to conceptualize this idea of navigation here. So I can do the same, of course, to others. I'm going to do a couple more. In this case, I'm going to go create another one for Reader Home Screen like this. And of course, I'm going to say Reader Home, or I think I called it Home Screen. Very good. It's going to have the same issue because I need to pass that NavController, which we can do. NavController. There we go, and go back, and the problem is over. So as a little exercise, I want you to do the same for the search screen, do the same for all other screens that we are going to have or we have created earlier here. So it's really simple. Just want to make sure that you get the hang of it. Okay, go ahead and do that, and I'll see you next.